Welcome to the FASA Leadership Lounge, where we dive into the policies shaping the work of Florida's school leaders. I'm Michelle White, Executive Director of the Florida Association of School Administrators.
And I'm Jessica Janasiewicz, lobbyist for FASA in several school districts around Florida.
We want to begin this week's episode with the major announcement. No, the legislature has not agreed on a budget, but we're very excited to announce that John Maxwell is going to be the final keynote speaker at FASA's Discover 26 conference.
That is amazing news. Dr. Maxwell is a New York Times bestselling author who's written over 100 books on leadership, including the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership and Developing the Leader in You.
He has been recognized as the #1 leader in business by the American Management Association, and Business Insider and Inc. magazine have both named him world's most influential leadership experts.
This is going to be so exciting. So all that being said, make sure you register for the Discover 26 conference now. This event is going to sell out quickly, and hotel rooms at the Omni Orlando Resort at Champions Gate are almost gone. So go to www.fasa.net to register today.
And now we can talk about some legislative updates and policy. So regularly scheduled topics. As you know, this session has been challenging, to say the least, with pretty much no one getting along with one another. And there's still no agreement on the state budget.
That's right. We have frustrations abound over at the Capitol, including current Senator and former Senate President Don Gates, who shared his frustrations last week, especially with his own political party, which is not always something we hear. He said, "I think we ought to be embarrassed. I think it's a shame. And as Republicans, we have a Republican governor, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate. We don't have any Democrats to argue with anymore." This is a direct quote from Senator Gates. So I think we sense the frustration there.
Absolutely. He even went on to say that the Democrats are in a decided minority. So we decided to argue with each other. That's inexcusable as Republicans. I think it's bad stewardship as conservatives. And I certainly hope that we improve and improve very quickly.
As someone who has been involved in the legislature since 2006, so 20 years now, Gates said that the 2026 session has been one of the worst that he's ever witnessed. As of last Tuesday, the legislature had only passed 86 out of 1,898 bills that have been filed for consideration. And you have to think also that some of those that they passed are not even really policy-related bills. They may be repealer bills where they get rid of the statute that no longer applies, things like that. So included in that 86 are things like that. So we're talking a very small amount of
settlements, right?
Settlements, right?
Financial
Absolutely.
settlements that have to be done. So it's shocking, the low number of bills, for sure.
Yes.
Of course, Governor DeSantis also had his own things to say, and he criticized the, quote, personal agenda of legislators last week. He said, "In my experience watching, not just here in Florida, but elsewhere, I think these guys get in trouble when they get in Washington, D.C. or get in Tallahassee, and then they pursue an agenda different than what they promised the voters."
The governor went on to say, "We're going to make sure that it gets done, and it's important for the people of Florida. I think you got to do what's right for the people that sent you there. It's not about any personal agenda."
Yeah, and so we know, there's a number of people not running for re-election that are certainly in leadership, like the governor, our Senate president, and our speaker.
That's right.
So all of these things kind of layer in some of these complexities. But well, let's talk about some bills that are getting here to the finish line as we're recording this, and just trying to make sure we keep all of our leaders updated. So the first two bills that are going to deal with school sports include Senate Bill 178, which is athletics in public K-12 schools, and House Bill 583 on physical education.
That's right. And they really do very different things. Senate Bill 178 is pretty simple. It basically allows a coach to use their own money to help a student out. So they could buy a meal, they could provide a ride home, things like that. There are guardrails. Parents have to sign off on that occurring. It can't be used as a recruiting tool, and there is a cap on how much a coach can spend. And that was really kind of driven by an issue from South Florida with former NFL player at that time last year, current coach down in Miami-Dade County. This was what kind of generated this bill, that they wanted to make sure that there was an ability for coaches to help out kids when need be.
For sure. So now let's talk about the other bill that I had mentioned, and that it's a whole different beast.
Yeah.
It rewrites the rules for extracurriculars, who can play, transfer rules, booster funding, appeal rights, even how the athletic association works. So basically, Senate Bill 178 helps individual kids in real life situations, and then this companion-ish redesigns the entire system.
That's right. So essentially, we did have a situation where statute was really lagging behind, or at least the governance of the high school athletic association. There are certain requirements in the statute that they are governed by, and as we've seen more and more choice options come into our system, there was some lacking in what the practice was. We have now everything from homeschool kids, charter school kids, traditional public school kids, kids that are on the voucher, you name it. We've got so many different types of students, and there were conflicting things in statute about who could play and when and their different eligibility. So they really wanted to work that out so that everyone would essentially have the same level of eligibility. It wouldn't be one set of rules for one set of students and one set for another. So both of these bills have been engrossed and enrolled, which is basically the process by which they are finalized. They make sure everything is, all the statutory references, things like that are all correct. And then they will be sent to the governor for his approvals. And that is, of course, up to legislative leadership when they decide to send those bills. Another bill that's ready for the governor is House Bill 1201, which is student health and safety. This bill strengthens how Florida schools support students with epilepsy and seizure disorders. It updates seizure action plans to be more clear and comprehensive. It expands which school staff must be trained, including teachers and bus drivers, and extends that training's validity for up to 5 years. It also requires schools to post seizure response posters and making emergency care hopefully faster and safer for students.
Another bill, Senate Bill 1062, which we have certainly discussed before, it is in its final stages, and it makes a Florida national leader in speech and debate education. It creates the Florida Speech and Debate Hall of Fame. It designates an annual speech and debate week and establishes the Florida Debate Initiative as the statewide organization supporting K through 20 programs. It expands teacher training, student access, competitions, and funding, while also strengthening civics, critical thinking, and leadership statewide.
There are a few other bills that are getting close to heading to the governor's desk. The first is Senate Bill 824, School District Unimproved Real Property, Senate Bill 182, School Teacher Training and Mentoring Program, and Senate Bill 124, dealing with the Florida virtual school. So let's take a look at these.
For sure. So first, let's talk about Senate Bill 824. This bill increases transparency around land that's owned by Florida school districts. It requires districts to report all unimproved property, meaning land without buildings, to the Department of Education each year, including the size, location, value, and the current use. The state must then publish a statewide report to support smarter land use, long-term planning, and public accountability.
That's right. And next is Senate Bill 182. This bill actually started out as a pretty narrow bill. It was just creating a statewide teacher training and mentoring program, which was aimed at improving teacher quality and student achievement. It allows experienced and retired teachers to mentor new or struggling teachers, especially in lower performing schools, with stipends that are potentially there for mentors and to help encourage them, obviously, to participate. The goal is to have stronger classroom management, better instruction, and improved outcomes for students. Now, what they've done, and we see this a lot towards the end of session, is you have a bill that seems seemingly, pretty narrow in scope, and it tends to become a train. We've actually had a number of trains already this session, and sometimes what happens is they get to be too filled with things, and so what happens is they die because no one can agree on it. So this was kind of the last iteration of a train during the legislative session. So in addition to what I just talked about with the mentoring program, they've also added language about requiring cursive writing. You may recall that was a bill we talked about
that one.
It didn't make it through this year, so now it's getting added on. There's also language regarding charter schools that are under increased scrutiny because of their school grades, that they can't dismiss any students during well or under that period. And then also, I think another one of our favorites from this year that we talked about and that we shared about it is the requirement to have a portrait of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln in certain classrooms. So that is all now contained within Senate Bill 182.
And others are hopefully that have more difficult language that like the House and the Senate are not agreeing on. We're seeing those kind of fall to the wayside.
Yes. For now. That's okay.
Okay. And then Senate Bill 124 that we also mentioned, this bill updates how Florida virtual school is governed and funded.
Mm-hmm.
It removes student enrollment priorities, gives the school more flexibility to generate and use supplemental revenue, and streamlines oversight of finances and staff.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to really modernize Florida virtual schools operations, strengthen accountability, reporting, and support a more sustainable technology-driven model for online education statewide. And we know Florida virtual school really has been a model across the country for delivering education in this way.
That's right. And so most of the bills that we've talked about thus far have not been too controversial. That has been seemingly kind of a theme this year. We haven't had a lot of the more controversial bills actually advance, but there was one that drew a lot of attention that is actually going to be heading to the governor's desk, and that's Senate Bill 1296. The bill is entitled Public Employees Relations Commission, PERC. Some of our members may know it as from that acronym. This bill looks at unions, and it had some pretty high-ranking people, even beyond the state of Florida, that are supporting it. Certainly, we had our education commissioner who came to committee and testified, for this bill. But even all the way up to the federal level, Linda McMahon, it was the Secretary of Education, of course, nationally, and she also came out and supported this bill.
That's right. So this bill passed the Senate last week, 73 to 37, and it requires local union chapters to have at least 50% of public employees in a bargaining unit to participate in elections. And then it needs 50% of those who vote to certify or recertify the union. The bill's sponsor pushing the measure, Representative Jenna Persons-Maleka, a Republican out of Fort Myers, said that the state constitution creates a right to collectively bargain. And that right belongs to public employees, not the unions. The unions that are doing their job to represent our hardworking Floridians should be in favor of this bill, she said on the House floor. But quote, what we're seeing is that unions have lost their way across the state, not all, but many, and they're putting politics over public employees.
Another person who supports this is the governor. He's actually come out and said that this was something he would support. So I think it will undoubtedly be signed by him when the legislature chooses to send it to his desk. So a couple other interesting kind of fun facts from this last week of session. Senator Corey Simon, who is the senator in Leon County and some of the surrounding counties, and also a former Florida State University football player.
Go Noles.
And then, that's right, Go Noles. And also a former NFL player. He filed an amendment to a bill that would rename the Tallahassee International Airport. First of all, that's just funny. International Airport after legendary college football coach Bobby Bowden. So it would be Bobby Bowden International Airport when you fly into Tallahassee. And also the outgoing senators and representatives got a chance to do their farewell speeches. That is usually a pretty long event in the House because they have so many people. They do limit the time. The Senate does not. So, for example, one day this week, there were two senators that did their goodbyes, and it was the entire morning and afternoon. I don't think they started hearing bills until I think like 4 o'clock or so in the afternoon. So it takes up a good bit of time.
And they give other people the opportunity to speak
That's right.
as well. So the
done.
senator gets to say their goodbye, but then others get to also say goodbye on top of it.
It's a lot. And if you're somebody who's waiting for a bill to come up and be heard, and it seems like it can get quite lengthy, and people get anxious about what's going to happen with their bills. And that's just kind of the nature of the last week or so of session. But it certainly is an indicator that session is ending. And of course, it is technically going to be over, but obviously without the budget done, it is not going to be over. And so we will certainly have more to cover when they decide to come back and do the budget.
That's right. And right now, there is nothing concrete as to what that's going to look like and how they are going to get the budget negotiated. Last we heard, there was a $1.4 billion difference between the House and the Senate. So there's a lot that they have to come to agreement on. And we know that they will be back for special session on congressional redistricting in April 20th to the 24th. So more updates to come. And we just want to thank you all for listening. It has been an interesting legislative session this year, and we'll continue to bring you updates as legislation moves forward to the governor and then, of course, into the rulemaking process.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lounge podcast presented by the Florida Association of School Administrators. Today's podcast was hosted by Michelle White and Jessica Janasiewicz. The podcast was produced by Jeff Willett. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. New episodes are released each Monday. For show topics, suggestions, questions, or comments, please email communications@fasa.net. We hope you enjoyed the show.